A gentle hum filled the small ship, the lullaby, as it floated weightlessly through the velvety darkness of space. Inside, nestled in the softly glowing cockpit, sat Pix, a traveler with no destination, only the endless drift ahead. At his feet, his loyal companion Petri, a small robotic dog with shimmering silver fur, rested quietly, his luminous eyes blinking slowly as if already half asleep. The journey had begun just as the stars began to awaken. The last traces of Pix's homeworld, a tiny blue-green planet, faded into the distance like a dream slipping from memory. He had no reason to stay, no urgency to leave, only the gentle pull of curiosity, leading him forward into the unknown. The ship's controls glowed dimly, casting a soft golden light over Pix's face as he leaned forward, watching the universe unfold before him. As the lullaby glided smoothly through the vast expanse, a nebula loomed in the distance, its soft colors swirling like paint in water. It pulsed gently, radiating a warmth that hummed through the ship's walls. Petri's ears twitched at the sound, a deep, soothing melody reverberating through space itself. The ship's sensors flickered as they registered the presence of the nebula's energy, but no alarms sounded. This was not a place of danger, but of quiet wonder. Pix leaned back in his chair, watching the nebula shift and glow. He reached for the small console beside him and turned a dial, lowering the ship's hum to a whisper. Silence embraced him, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the navigation system, like a slow heartbeat guiding him through the unknown. The stars outside flickered lazily, each one a distant traveler in its own right, wandering the vast ocean of the cosmos. As the ship drifted closer, tiny specks of light shimmered within the nebula's soft haze. They moved like fireflies in a summer field, weaving patterns that Pix could almost understand, as if space itself was whispering a lullaby just for him. He reached out toward the viewport, tracing their gentle arcs with his fingertips, feeling a connection to something far greater than himself. "Looks like we've found the first dream," Pix murmured, resting a hand on Petri's smooth metallic back. Petri gave a quiet whir in response, settling deeper into his curled-up position. The little robot's soft vibrations were comforting, a reminder that even in the vast solitude of space, Pix was never truly alone. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, and Pix knew that beyond this nebula lay infinite wonders, floating villages, silent seas, and glowing lanterns drifting through the cosmos. But for now, he let the lullaby move at its own pace, flowing with the quiet current of space, where time itself seemed to slow. He exhaled deeply, releasing any lingering thoughts of the past, letting them fade into the starlit void behind him. With a sigh, Pix closed his eyes, letting the ship carry him forward, deeper into the peaceful unknown. Somewhere in the distance, the nebula's song continued, a slow, humming pulse of light and warmth. The journey had only just begun, but already Pix felt at home among the stars. The lullaby drifted through a stretch of space where the stars hung low and golden, their soft glow reflecting off the ship's smooth exterior. Pix sat in his chair, absently running a hand over Petri's metallic head, watching the endless sprawl of the cosmos unfold before him. The hum of the ship was steady, a quiet presence beneath the stillness of the void. It had been days, or perhaps weeks, since he had last seen anything but open space. Time was difficult to measure when there were no sunrises, no shifting skies, only the slow, gentle pull of movement through the unknown. But tonight, or whatever passed for night here, something new appeared on the horizon. Soft lights, like lanterns floating on a midnight sea, shimmered in the distance. They flickered gently, as if swaying in an unseen breeze. Pix sat up, eyes narrowing as he adjusted the ship's scanners. The readings were faint, barely registering as solid objects, yet unmistakably there. Petrie let out a soft whir, his luminous eyes flickering. He, too, had noticed the anomaly. "You see it, don't you?" Pix murmured. Petrie gave a slow, mechanical blink, his version of a nod. With a quiet breath, Pix guided the lullaby forward, coasting toward the glow. As the distance closed, the lights took shape, revealing a series of floating structures suspended in the emptiness. They were connected by soft golden threads of energy, bridges that shimmered between the buildings like strands of woven light. The structures themselves seemed weightless, gently bobbing in space as if carried by an invisible tide. Pix's fingers hovered over the ship's controls. This was unlike anything he had ever encountered before. A village, adrift in the stars. A deep, rhythmic chime resonated through the ship, vibrating through Pix's bones. It wasn't an alarm, more like a distant bell tolling from within the village itself. A greeting, perhaps? An invitation? He glanced at Petrie, who tilted his head in curiosity. "Let's take a closer look," Pix said, maneuvering the lullaby toward an open space near the village. He brought the ship to a slow halt just beyond the outermost structure, allowing it to hover in the delicate stillness. The airlock hissed as he prepared to step outside. The moment his boots touched the platform, he felt it, not gravity, not in the usual sense, but a gentle pull, as if the space around the village held its own quiet presence, keeping him grounded without effort. The air, if it could be called that, was thick with warmth, humming faintly with energy. Pix took a few careful steps forward. The nearest structure was a domed dwelling, its walls made of some translucent material that pulsed with soft, golden light. Through it, he could see movement, a shadow passing slowly, unhurriedly, as though time here moved at its own pace. A figure emerged from the glow, tall and draped in flowing fabric that shimmered like liquid silver. The being moved toward him with the ease of drifting stardust. Their face was smooth, ageless, their eyes dark pools reflecting the distant galaxies. Pix felt no fear, only the hush of something ancient and knowing. He inclined his head in greeting. "Hello," he said softly. The being studied him for a moment before speaking, their voice a melody woven into the fabric of space. "You have come to Aura." Aura. The name settled over Pix like a lullaby. He let the word sink in, feeling the weight of it, the quiet promise it carried. "I'd like to learn more," he said simply. The being gave a slow, measured nod. "Then stay. Walk with us." Pix glanced back at the lullaby, at Petrie waiting at the threshold, and then forward again, toward the lights, the floating village, the unknown. With a deep breath, he took a step forward. Pix followed the being deeper into the floating village, his steps slow and careful as he took in the sights around him. The soft golden bridges connecting the structures pulsed with a gentle warmth beneath his feet, almost as if they were alive. As he walked, the air around him carried a subtle hum, not quite music, but something close, like the quiet breathing of the village itself. Petrie trotted alongside him, his metallic paws making no sound against the golden path. His ears twitched as he took in the new surroundings, his glowing eyes darting from one structure to another, scanning, analyzing, recording. The being, still nameless, led them through the village in silence. Other figures moved through the glowing corridors, their forms graceful, their steps unhurried. Some glanced at Pix with mild curiosity, but none seemed alarmed by his presence. It was a place of quiet acceptance, where time stretched like the endless drift of space itself. They reached a central platform, a wide open space where the golden bridges converged. Above it, a massive sphere of light hovered, its surface swirling with soft colors, shifting like liquid opal. The being stopped and turned to Pix. "This is the heart of Aura," they said, gesturing toward the sphere. "It is the thread that binds the village, the rhythm to which we move." Pix watched as tiny flecks of light floated toward the sphere, dissolving into its surface. Energy flowed through the bridges in response, pulsing outward in a steady, gentle rhythm. He could feel it beneath his feet, a soft vibration that resonated deep within him. "How does it work?" Pix asked, his voice hushed. The being tilted their head slightly, as if considering the question. "It listens," they said simply, "to the thoughts of those who walk its paths, to the dreams carried by travelers. It remembers and carries them forward." Pix nodded slowly, feeling the quiet hum settle into his bones. A place that listened, that carried the dreams of those who passed through. He thought of the lullaby, drifting endlessly through the stars, carrying only him and Petri. What memories had he left behind? What dreams had he yet to find? "You may rest here," the being continued. "Stay as long as you need. The village will hold you." Pix glanced at Petri, who gave a small, reassuring whir. He turned back to the being and nodded. "I think I'd like that." The being inclined their head slightly before stepping away, disappearing into the soft glow of the village. Pix exhaled, taking a seat on the edge of the platform. The gentle pulse of Aura moved through him, steady and warm, like a heartbeat stretching across the stars. For the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. Pix sat at the edge of the central platform, gazing at the swirling sphere of light that pulsed at the heart of Aura. The rhythm of the village had settled into him, a slow and steady presence, like the gentle rock of a ship floating on an invisible tide. Petri lay curled beside him, his small metallic body occasionally whirring softly as he adjusted his position. The village felt alive, but not in the way a city hummed with movement and urgency. Here, everything existed in quiet harmony. The structures floated weightlessly, their golden bridges shimmering with each passing pulse of energy. The air, if it could be called that, was thick with a deep, soothing hum, as if the space itself was breathing. Pix let his fingers brush against the platform beneath him. It was smooth and cool, yet there was a sensation beneath his fingertips, like the faintest vibration of sound moving through it. He closed his eyes and listened, letting the currents of Aura wash over him. That was when he first heard it. A whisper, soft and distant, like words carried across a slow-moving stream. It wasn't in a language he recognized, but the feeling behind it was clear, an echo of something long past, a memory drifting through the village like a forgotten melody. Petri lifted his head, ears flicking as his sensors picked up the same sound. He let out a quiet beep, shifting closer to Pix. You hear it too, don't you? Pix murmured, opening his eyes. The whisper came again, weaving through the golden air. This time, Pix stood, following the sound as it drifted toward one of the smaller floating dwellings. The structure was different from the others. Its glow was dimmer, its edges softened by time. Unlike the other buildings, which pulsed with the steady rhythm of the village's heart, this one flickered unevenly, as though caught between past and present. Pix stepped onto the narrow bridge leading toward it. The golden threads beneath his feet responded to his movement, lighting up gently as he walked. As he reached the threshold, the whisper grew clearer, not words exactly, but a feeling, a sensation of longing, of something unfinished. He hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. The interior was bathed in a soft, amber glow. Wisps of light drifted lazily through the space, curling and unraveling like threads of stardust. In the center of the room stood a tall, curved structure, almost like an ancient seat carved from translucent stone. Floating just above it was a small orb, its surface rippling like liquid gold. Pix reached out a hand, but stopped just short of touching it. He could feel the warmth radiating from it, the same gentle pulse that moved through the village. But this one was different. It wasn't connected to the larger rhythm of aura. It was isolated, waiting. Petri hopped up onto the curved seat and tilted his head, scanning the orb. A quiet beep sounded from him, and Pix glanced down. The readings on Petri's interface were unfamiliar, fluctuating patterns that didn't match anything they had encountered before. "What do you think?" Pix asked softly. Petri blinked, then nudged the orb lightly with his nose. The moment of contact sent a ripple through the room. The flickering glow steadied, and the whispering currents sharpened into something clearer, an image forming in Pix's mind. He saw a figure standing alone at the edge of a bridge, their gaze fixed on the distant stars. The sense of longing deepened, an ache that settled into his chest. Then, as quickly as it had come, the image faded. Pix let out a slow breath. "A memory," he murmured. The orb pulsed once, as if in response. A soft rustling at the entrance made Pix turn. The same being who had welcomed him to Aura stood there, their luminous form casting gentle shadows against the walls. "You've found a lost current," they said, their voice a melodic hum. Pix frowned slightly. "A lost current?" The being stepped forward, gazing at the orb. "Not all who come to Aura are ready to let go. Some memories remain, drifting through the village like echoes. This one has been waiting for someone to listen." Pix looked back at the orb. It glowed warmly, patiently. "What happens now?" he asked. The being studied him for a long moment before speaking. "That is for you to decide." Pix felt the weight of the words settle over him. He glanced at Petri, who watched him expectantly, then back at the orb. Carefully, he reached out and let his fingertips brush against its surface. A wave of warmth rushed through him, and the whispering currents turned into something steadier. A voice, quiet but clear, finally finding its way through the vastness of space. And for the first time in a long while, the lost memory was heard. The light of the memory orb dimmed gradually, returning to its gentle, amber hue. Pix stepped back, the echo of the voice still resonating softly within him. It hadn't been a conversation, more like a feeling shared between two souls, separated by time, but briefly aligned. Outside the dwelling, Aura's golden light bathed the floating village in a quiet glow. The bridges still shimmered with rhythmic pulses, as though the heart of the place had gently acknowledged the memory's awakening. Petri trotted ahead, pausing now and then to scan the air or glance over the edge of the bridges at the star-flecked space below. Pix followed with an easy stride, his mind still drifting through the remnants of what he had just felt. He didn't get far before he noticed someone watching him. On a small platform just off the main path sat a figure, their legs dangling over the edge, their back resting against a lantern post. The lantern above their head swayed gently, despite the lack of any breeze, its glow a soft blue instead of gold. The figure looked relaxed, comfortable, as though they had been waiting there a long time and intended to wait longer still. Pix approached with quiet curiosity. The figure turned their head as he neared and smiled, a wide, knowing smile that reached deep, thoughtful eyes. They wore a robe woven from what looked like strands of light, shifting from indigo to silver as they moved. Their hair floated loosely around their shoulders, as if the gravity here didn't quite apply. "Welcome, Drifter," the figure said, their voice smooth and calm, with a hint of amusement. "You've stirred something old today." Pix offered a polite nod. "I didn't mean to intrude." "Oh, you didn't intrude," the figure said, waving a hand lazily through the air. "You listened. That's more than most ever do." Petri approached the figure, sniffing at the air before settling onto the platform beside them. The figure chuckled, reaching down to scratch behind one of Petri's mechanical ears. Petri let out a satisfied chirp and leaned into the touch. "I'm Elo," they said, glancing back at Pix, keeper of the threads. Pix sat beside them, careful not to disturb the shifting light of their robe. "What does that mean, exactly?" Elo gestured to the lanterns swaying above and around them. "Each of these carries a thread of memory, feeling, or quiet thought. I tend them, keep them from unraveling or fading. Aura may hum with rhythm, but these lights, these are its quiet stories." Pix followed Elo's gaze to the lanterns. As his eyes adjusted, he began to see it. Inside each one, faint shapes moved, shadows of moments long past, tiny memories looping in quiet stillness. "That one," Elo pointed to a pale purple lantern, "is a dance someone dreamed of but never danced. And that one," they said, motioning to a lantern glowing green, "holds the echo of a lullaby hummed to a child who had already fallen asleep." Pix stared at the lanterns in awe. "They're beautiful." "They're honest," Elo replied. "And in a place like this, honesty drifts quietly. That's why I gather the forgotten threads. Sometimes they wait for someone to find them, like the one you touched earlier." Pix thought of the memory, of the figure alone on the bridge, and nodded. It felt unfinished. "They usually are," Elo said with a soft sigh. "But they don't need to be completed. They just need to be heard." There was a long moment of stillness between them, nothing but the gentle pulsing of light and the occasional soft whir from Petri as he scanned another lantern. Pix leaned back and let the calm wrap around him. "Do you ever leave the village?" he asked quietly. Elo smiled, not unkindly. "I've drifted far before, but I found my place here, where the stars pause long enough for people to remember what they've forgotten." Pix watched as Elo plucked one of the lanterns from the air and held it gently in their hands. Inside, the shadow of a kite flickered across a sky made of memory. Elo cradled it for a moment, then whispered a word Pix didn't recognize, and the lantern floated back up, slightly brighter than before. "What did you say?" Pix asked. Elo shrugged. "Nothing that matters now, just something the memory needed to hear." They looked at him with a twinkle in their eye. "You've got some of your own, you know. Threads unraveling, pieces drifting, auras good for that." Pix looked down at his hands, then across the starlit bridges of the village. "Maybe I do." Elo stood slowly, the light robe falling around them like liquid starlight. "You'll know when you're ready to follow them," they said. "Until then, walk the village. Listen, you'll find what's yours in due time." They turned and began walking toward one of the outer bridges, Petri following a few steps before stopping and looking back at Pix, as if making sure he was still there. Pix remained seated a while longer, watching the lanterns sway, each one holding a fragment of something that had once mattered to someone. The next day in Aura arrived not with a sunrise, but with a subtle shift in color. Pix had slept lightly, resting on a platform just beneath a canopy of memory lanterns. When he opened his eyes, the soft golden light had changed to a cool lavender hue, bathing everything in a dreamy twilight glow. The bridges shimmered with delicate blues and purples, and the air buzzed with a new sort of energy. Not louder, but different, as if the village were inhaling before a moment of clarity. Petri was already awake, ears perked, head tilted upward. He chirped softly and nudged Pix's side. "What is it, bud?" Pix asked, sitting up slowly. A low chime echoed through the village, a sound Pix hadn't heard before. Not the deep pulse of Aura's heart, and not the whispering hum of drifting memories. This was something lighter, brighter. Just as Pix stood, a familiar figure approached from across the bridge. Elo, their robe glowing pale blue in the lavender light. "You're up early," Elo said, their voice even softer than usual. Pix nodded, glancing around. "Something's changed." Elo gave a gentle smile. "You're in luck. Today is a blooming." Pix raised an eyebrow. "A what?" "A rare thing," Elo said, gesturing for him to follow. "The village shifts every so often, when enough memory threads are stirred or remembered. The light changes, the air thickens with echo, and the blooms return." They walked together across the golden bridge, now tinted purple beneath their feet. As they neared the central platform, Pix began to notice small specks of color floating in the air. Soft, glowing motes, like pollen drifting through space. They pulsed gently, in time with the rhythm of the village. Elo led him to a circular clearing surrounded by domed structures, each one now glowing from within like lanterns of their own. From the center of the clearing, vines of soft light began to rise, curling upward like spirals of incense smoke. Each vine carried a flower, if it could be called that, delicate and translucent, shaped from shimmering strands of memory. "These are blooms?" Pix asked, stepping closer, mesmerized. "Yes," Elo said. "Memories that were heard but never spoken aloud. They take shape here, briefly, and then return to the currents." Pix watched as one of the flowers unfurled beside him. Inside its shimmering petals, he saw a scene: 2 children chasing glowing insects across a field of tall grass under a lilac sky. He could hear laughter, faint and far away, and smelled something sweet, like fruit warmed by the sun. The flower drifted past him, gently spinning, before dissolving into light. "They're beautiful," he murmured. Elo nodded. "Each one belongs to someone, sometimes someone here, sometimes a traveler long gone. Pix stared into another bloom. This one held the image of a boat floating on an endless sea, its passenger asleep beneath a patchwork quilt, rocking gently as stardust fell like snow. "Does everyone see the same memory?" he asked. "No," Elo replied. "Each bloom shows what you're meant to see. It resonates with something inside you, not always something clear, often just a feeling." Pix watched a third bloom drift past. This one held nothing he could describe, just a sense of warmth, of being held, of stillness wrapped around him like a soft night. He sat slowly on the edge of the platform, his gaze fixed on the gentle dance of the memory blooms. Petri curled beside him, his gaze also locked on the drifting light. Occasionally he let out a soft beep, as if recognizing something too. Elo remained standing nearby, arms folded gently in their glowing robe. "I've seen hundreds of blooms," they said quietly, "but they always shift, always change. The village never repeats itself. Each blooming is shaped by the thoughts of those present." Pix considered that. "So this is part of me?" "Part of you," Elo agreed, "and part of everyone who's walked here. The village listens, and when it's full enough of those quiet voices, it answers." Pix looked up into the violet sky. More blooms were rising now, drifting higher into the upper reaches of the village, where the bridges became faint outlines and the light threads stretched into stars. He suddenly thought of a memory, not a vivid image, but a feeling. The feeling of sitting beside a window as rain fell, warm tea in his hands, nowhere to be and nothing pressing to do. A quiet day, long ago. A peace that had come and gone before he even knew to treasure it. One of the blooms drifted past. Inside it, he saw the same window, the same cup, the same slow, silver rain. His breath caught. "It's mine," he whispered. Elo turned slightly toward him. "Then it's been waiting." Pix didn't reach for the bloom. He simply watched it float upward, slowly fading into the sky like a dream dissolving upon waking. The emotion it left behind lingered, soft, sweet, a little sad. "I didn't think I'd forgotten that," Pix said, more to himself than anyone. "Most don't realize they've forgotten," Elo replied, "until a place like Aura reminds them." They stood together for a long time, saying nothing, surrounded by drifting memories that glowed and vanished like fireflies in the night. Eventually, the sky began to shift again, from violet to soft rose, signaling the end of the blooming. The flowers dissolved, the vines faded, and the village's heartbeat returned to its usual rhythm. Pix stood and stretched, his heart lighter than it had been in a long while. "Thank you," he said. Elo smiled. "There's more still, Drifter. The village isn't done with you yet." Pix glanced at Petri, who let out a small, cheerful chirp. Together, they stepped back onto the golden path, leaving the field of blooms behind, but carrying something from it within them. Somewhere above, a lantern flickered into being. The village was still. After the blooming, a hush had settled over Aura, a deep, sacred quiet, like the pause between the notes of a lullaby. Pix sat near the edge of a suspended platform, legs dangling freely into the star-speckled void. Petri lay beside him, head resting on his paws. His usual whirring hum now slowed to a soft purr. The memories, the lanterns, the blooms, they lingered in Pix's mind like echoes of a dream. Some details already blurred at the edges, while others held firm, carved into his chest in the shape of a feeling. A window and rain, a child's laugh in a field of tall grass, A single voice saying thank you without words. Aura had changed him, but it hadn't asked him to change. That was the beauty of it. The village had asked nothing. It had only listened. He heard the sound of footsteps behind him, familiar, patient. Elo approached with a small vessel in their hands. It shimmered faintly in the early glow of the bridge lights, a swirling pool of silvery threads floating inside it. "For you," they said softly, sitting beside him. "The village offers this to travelers when it's time." Pix tilted his head. "Time for what?" "To leave," Elo replied. "Not because you must, just because the current is moving again." Pix looked down at the vessel. Inside it, the threads moved like ripples on water. He could sense something inside them. A quiet collection of moments, feelings, little impressions, too small to hold, but too real to ignore. "It's a fragment," Elo explained, "of aura, not the place, but the feeling of it. A reminder. It will drift with you." Pix took the vessel carefully. It was light, almost weightless, but warm in his hands. Petri stood and sniffed it gently before giving a small beep of approval. A pause. "You know," Pix said after a while, "I wasn't looking for this place." "No one ever is," Elo said. "That's how aura finds you." Pix smiled quietly and looked out over the village one last time. The floating homes still drifted peacefully, their golden bridges glowing like threads in a tapestry woven by the stars. The central sphere still pulsed gently at the heart of it all, beating like a distant drum in deep space. "What happens to the memories I saw?" Pix asked, not needing an answer, but wanting to ask anyway. "They stay," Elo said, "even the ones you forgot again. Aura remembers what you're not ready to." Pix nodded. The understanding didn't need to be perfect. It only needed to feel true. And it did. He rose slowly, the vessel still in hand. Petri padded beside him as they walked toward the farthest bridge, one he hadn't crossed before. It led away from the center of the village, up a gentle slope made of braided light. Elo walked with him to the edge. "Will I find this place again?" Pix asked. Elo gave the faintest of smiles. "Maybe, maybe not in the same way, but parts of aura follow those who've listened. You may see it again in a dream, or in a reflection, or just in the quiet between thoughts." Pix paused, thoughtful. "That sounds like something you'd say." "It's something aura would say," Elo replied. At the edge of the bridge stood a platform, smaller than the others, shaped like a flower that had only just begun to open. Sitting in its center was a glider, sleek, silver, and gently pulsing with a soft, blue glow. The lullaby was waiting. Pix stepped forward and turned once more to Elo. "Thank you," he said. Elo bowed their head gently. "Keep drifting, Pix." Pix climbed aboard the glider, and Petri settled into his usual spot at his feet. The vessel of threads tucked securely in a side panel, already beginning to hum faintly in tune with the ship. The glider rose, silent and smooth, lifting them slowly above the platform. The bridge and village began to fall away beneath them, drifting into the distance like a slowly fading melody. Above them, the stars brightened, and just ahead, hanging in the sky like a lantern of its own, was a soft white glow, a star that shimmered more gently than the rest. Petri let out a small, curious chirp. Pix nodded. "Let's go see what that one's about." The glider turned, guided by thought more than controls, and began to drift forward, leaving behind the floating village of Aura, but not forgetting it, never forgetting it. And far behind them, Elo stood on the bridge, robes trailing in the light, watching as the drifter and his small silver companion disappeared into the vast quiet. The drifting star pulsed once, slowly, and then the stars kept turning.